So now that I've got the 8032 SK working, it's time to turn my attention to the printer that also came with it. It's a MPP-1361 and that does connect via the IEEE 488 port. As you can see there, it is in very rough shape. Which gives you some indication as to how poorly that 8032 SK was stored. So it was in a similar kind of atrocious condition, that computer, when I started working on it. And I expect this to have the same kind of damage with rust and corrosion to the PCB. I'll see what I can do about the corroded bars in this thing. And this, I can't remember what it's called, the rod that the print head slides along. It's an interesting mechanism. It actually uses this worm drive to move the head back and forth. The print engine, as far as I'm aware, is actually a Centronics unit. That's the ribbons that it uses. Centronics 150, I think, or something like that. And it is completely and utterly unsupported. You cannot get new ribbons for it anymore. But being a dot matrix, that doesn't really matter because you can still print and get an image if you get the carbon copy paper or the actual transfer films themselves with the carbon on the back. So it doesn't even matter if you don't have a ribbon, you can still get an image out of this thing. It just means single sheet feeds only, unless you can get carbon transfer tractor feed paper and just use the rear sheet with the transfer on it. I'm not going to go to such extremes. I just want to see if this thing even works, and then we'll take it from there. If it requires too much work, I probably won't even bother, simply because it's totally unsupported and going to be a nightmare just getting a cartridge for it. If I can get it working simply, then yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll get it working and we'll try it with some transfer film. But first things first, I must clean this thing. It's absolutely disgusting because it has been stored badly, and that is spider and insect excrement all over it. That needs to go. So the entire print engine control board and power supply section comes out as one assembly from that printer, and you can see that board was definitely designed by Commodore, as it is fully populated with MOS ICs, including even a MOS PROM there as well. I assume that's what that is. Looks like there hasn't been any corrosion to this board, so it's probably going to be okay. Probably is just going to work. But of course I am going to clean it all up. I don't want to turn it on like this, and I definitely want to clean that case. So once this is all cleaned, we'll give it a go. And I don't see any evidence of leaking capacitors either, which is a good thing. Yeah, it's looking really good. One slightly concerning thing is that the IEC mains input jack is the type that is an integrated noise filter, and there are capacitors directly across the mains in these, and they are well known to explode at this kind of age. Fortunately, this is the modern type that is integrated into the IEC jack, so replacing this will be very trivial. These are on the shelf and they're not expensive. Changing it does require soldering, but that's not rocket science. I can do that. I'll give it a go, see if it gets warm. If it's getting warm, that's a bad sign. It needs to go. So we'll give it a chance. What's interesting in this board and power supply frame at the rear here is that obviously this thing has had standing water in it at some stage, because there is all corrosion at the rear here. And that's where the board actually slots in. And fortunately, it sits on these little standoffs, so it just missed getting corroded. So it looks like this thing might be all right, but it does just go to show what kind of storage conditions this printer and the 8032 SK were in. And it's even more of a miracle that I got that 8032 SK working, considering I now have proof that it was basically sitting with standing water over the motherboard. And that explains why there were so many ICs that I needed to replace due to horrific levels of corrosion. As it turns out, this print engine is made by Brother, and it's an 82W. I notice that this engine is also used on some other CBM printers, so it's not unique to this actual device. Unfortunately, it still seems you can't get any cartridges for it, so the same still applies, and this printer has issues. This rail that the print head runs on is it is rusty, and there's extreme friction in getting this thing to actually move, so I'm gonna have to deal with that. So I will have to remove this rail. It doesn't look too difficult, and remove all of that rust off it. And I saw something else deeply concerning as well. It looks like this thing has taken an impact at some stage. So this gear for the actual platen, I think it's called, is broken in half. So there will effectively be no line feed. This is the motor that advances the paper. You can see that gear is not exactly turning correctly either. And the gear that it meshes to, well, that's just ruined. It's broken. So if I can't find a replacement for that, well, this printer is basically junk. Unless it's, you know, just printing one line at a time. Yeah, it's in pretty sad state anyway, but yeah, it is what it is. I've done what I can with this printer. This bar that the print head slides on, I've sanded out all of the rust on it, and it does actually move smoothly across that. I've cleaned all of the junk out of that worm drive thing. Lubricated the hell out of absolutely everything I could find. I've wire brushed as much rust off the other metal parts that I could. Cleaned the filth out of the paper path. I think I'm ready to see if this thing actually does a self-test. Yeah, if it actually shows any signs of life at all, it might be worth pursuing trying to find a replacement gear for the paper advance. Because at the moment, that's kind of crap. I mean, it'll print a few lines. Maybe that's enough for a demonstration, but not actually usable. So it's now connected to mains power, and I haven't tripped the circuit breaker, and that input mains filter has not exploded. Doesn't appear to be getting warm. And yes, that is 240 volts right next to my finger. I don't recommend doing that. Let's see what happens. Will it do anything at all, or will it just explode? No surprise. Holy shit, it works. I was about to say, no surprises, it's dead, but there you go. I was wrong. It works. Now, I know dot matrix printers back in this day did have self-test functionality. I don't know if that's the same case with a Commodore controller board, but we'll see. It's usually a case of powering on the unit with one of the buttons held down. I will go and find some paper and let's see what happens. Well, there you go. It works. Just got to find a gear for it, and I think this thing should be good to demonstrate with the 8032 SK. I will just need to get some carbon paper for it. But yeah, that's working. I don't have any at the moment, unfortunately. I might go have another look, but I very much doubt that I do. And there you have it. That is possibly the only Commodore MPP-1361 teardown on YouTube, and even showing it working. And it will work fully if I can get a gear. Well, and a cartridge, but I can always, as mentioned, just use the alternate method. But that's freaking impressive, because that is all original MOS silicon on that control board, and it all works. I didn't have to reseat anything. They're all socketed, and it just works. I'm very impressed. But then again, these dot matrix printers, they're basically bomb-proof, unlike everything made today. You see dot matrix printers still in use in some industrial settings. They look like they've been sitting there from the 80s, and they're still working every single day. You don't see that from any other printer made today. It's just ridiculous how well these things are made. They're well over-engineered. Yeah, hopefully I can find that gear, and it's worth investing in a cartridge in this thing, and then I can get it working on the 8032, which will be awesome if I can demonstrate it in its original business configuration.